Thank you so much for joining our event this evening. This is our first virtual event specifically focused on helping you advance your career in tech. And my name is Liz. I'm from AgilePDX, and AgilePDX is a community of independent Agile practitioners, enthusiasts, and Agile aspiring hearts and minds based in Portland, Oregon. But with our virtual environment, we are spanning the globe and so excited to see new faces joining us, including yours. AgilePDX hosts several community-focused learning events each month, and these events are all free and virtual right now, of course. Check out our meetup page to learn more and to find out how to join our Agile PM Roundtable, the High Church of Lean Coffee, and more events. And we will send a link in the chat. There's that link. And today we are absolutely delighted to be partnering with our premier sponsor, ProFocus Technologies, to bring you an evening of career in tech insights and strategies for you to move forward in your journey. So with that, I am so excited to introduce you to our moderator for this evening, ProFocus Vice President and all-around great person, James Lund.
Thank you, Liz. Appreciate it. Hello, everybody. I'm really excited to be here, and I'm really excited about this event. As Liz mentioned, this is an annual event that we partner with AgilePDX with, and really thank you, AgilePDX, and thanks to our panelists for joining. We feel like this is such a value add to so many participants. Just the learning from the panelists that have joined us last year. I really am disappointed that we can't be in a room together with you. A little bit different doing it on Zoom, but really excited to be here. As Liz mentioned, I'm James Lund with ProFocus Technology. We are a technology staffing and consulting provider here in the Portland metro area. Our mission is to create exceptional experiences for all of our candidates, clients, as well as our internal team members. And consistent with that mission is creating an exceptional experience, and part of our core values is to share generously. And so really that's part of the reason for doing this event is to make great connections and to share knowledge and to help you along your career and your journey, whether it's finding a new role or advancing in the current role that you're in within tech. So I'm going to jump into the agenda here. Just so everyone is aware, we are recording this, so you'll be able to revisit these slides, and we're also going to package all of this up, everything, key takeaways, and really the most important insights from this event into a blog that we're going to share as well. So you'll have access to the recording as well as that blog to review. First, we've got our welcome, and then we're going to have presentations from each of our panelists who you can see on the screen, and as well as a group Q&A, and then individual opportunity for you to connect directly. So right now, obviously, this is just a webinar, so you're going to hear a presentation. We're going to have Q&A. We do have the Q&A box there. Feel free to go ahead and type any questions along the way throughout these presentations from each of our panelists. I'll be reviewing those, and then at the end of all the sessions, all the presentations, we're going to go over those and the ones that we have time for. And then if we don't get to any of your questions, you'll be able to go into your own little breakout sessions with each panelist. And we'll send you a link, and you'll have access to jump right into those at the end. And then you'll actually be on video and be able to talk directly with each of with any panelist rooms that you go to. So jump right in. Just to introduce you to our panelists here, we have Mike Bebo. He's a software development manager with AWS. Tyler Eastman is with ClassDojo, Android engineering manager. Kristen Andrews, senior software engineering manager with Zoom+Care. And then John Boone, he is our president and founder of ProFocus Technology. So we're going to jump right into the presentation. Just a reminder too, so you can go ahead and put all your questions into that Q&A. You can hold them until the end as well, but we'll be reviewing throughout the presentations too. So if something pops up, we're not going to actually answer them or address them until after all the presentations, so that each panelist can have an opportunity to address the questions. So we'll start off with Tyler. Welcome, Tyler.
Hello, hello. Thank you, James. Thanks, AgilePDX. Thanks, ProFocus. Good to be here in my garage. This is not the beach. Don't let my background fool you. Actually, I don't know if that's even my current background right now. I can't see my face. I'm assuming it is. But yeah, let's see. So I thought I'd go over kind of my career a little bit, and then talk about some learnings and some recent exciting transitions I made. Let's see. So I'm a self-taught Android engineer. I'm an Android manager now, but still very much in the code. Engineering is my passion. Let's see. I started my journey in tech a little over a decade ago. I was actually working at a health club in the Portland area called Club Sport. Some of you may know it, with my buddy James Lund. Funny enough. And back then, I was going to school for opera, and I really enjoyed that. But I realized pretty quickly that it's going to be hard for me to make a career out of opera. Plus, there's a lot of travel involved, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But while I was in school, I didn't want to, at the time, I thought, you know, I don't want to find a job where I'm going to have to sit at my desk all day. And it wasn't until I got further in my college career that I realized that might be actually kind of a good thing. So anyway, I was working at the health club, and I picked up a C programming book at the library. The computers at the health club were thin clients, so you couldn't really install any software on it. But what I ended up doing to kind of circumvent that is I built the C-based chess AI that I hosted on a system at my house, so that when there was a lull in traffic at the health club, I could telnet into my home system and play chess still, keep myself entertained. I didn't think that was a weird thing until I showed it to my wife, and she said, "You need to stop doing this and start doing this." So with her help, I put together a resume, went down to Xerox that had an office in Wilsonville at the time, and applied for a manual QE position. I ended up getting the position, and it was my first desk job, so to speak. It was a great job, but basically, if you can imagine a room full of people sitting in chairs with Excel spreadsheets and stopwatches in one hand and printers to their side, and we would test the click to clunk speed the entire day. Type it into a spreadsheet, it would be compiled and sent off to the engineers, who would then use that for their performance calculations. Told my boss at the time, "Hey, this is crazy, we can automate this." He gave me 3 months to have my own little office and my own little desk and a computer that was halfway decent, and I was able to write something that automated that. That kind of got me promoted through Xerox from being a QE engineer up to a tools developer, etc. But I knew that that's not really what I wanted to do long term. Around that time, Android was just released. So I started learning that with the hopes to port my chess program, which at that point in time had evolved from being just a chess engine to a full-scale chess UI built in Java with a chess engine to back. I wanted to port that over to Android because there was literally nothing on the Google Play Store at the time. I think there was one chess program that was pretty hastily written. So needless to say, I didn't get it released in time. I ended up moving down to California after Xerox to start my career and to start a company to do that. But I went to a meetup and I ended up getting headhunted by a pretty awesome company that I think is still around called Mobile Roadie. And we developed white label applications for thousands of customers. The Sony Music Group was really our biggest client. So Madonna, Taylor Swift, Red Hot Chili Peppers, etc. Super fun, and that was my first Android job. A couple of years into that, my wife and I wanted to start our family. So we decided to pack up, move back up to Oregon, and do that. In Oregon, I got picked up by Nike. Was there for, I think, 5 or 6 years. And I was their first Android hire, which is kind of a cool badge of honor. But I'm certainly not, there's a ton of Android folks there now. It's a great company as well. But yeah, while I was there, I ended up leading the shared components, which is basically a shared library that all of the Nike apps use, and it brings profile, common utilities, etc. to the applications. Left Nike for Walmart Labs a few years back, and there I made my transition into engineering management. And I ended up leading Pickup chain-wide for, I think, until June, so a good 2 years there. After Walmart, or actually I should say at Walmart, I leveraged, oh, hey, look at that. That's a cool slide. At Walmart, I leaned heavily on ProFocus to help me staff up my teams. I led 4 teams there, and ProFocus was instrumental in getting them staffed up. And then after Walmart, I used ProFocus as a job seeker, which was really cool having that relationship already, but being able to lean on them for help. Or I guess I was leaning on them for help in the beginning, but just a different kind of help. Anyway, after Walmart, I went to a company called ClassDojo. ClassDojo is really an amazing company to work for. We're small, fully remote, and we have about 50 people that are spread all over the globe. That's a Zoom picture that we took of the whole company just a week or so ago. We are a communications platform for parents, teachers, students, and mentors. And we provide tools that are essential to teachers who are teaching remotely or in person. Our mission statement is to bring communities together and help them give their kids an education they love. And truly, honestly, I've never met a company or individuals at a company that embody that vision more. So it's pretty excellent to work at a place where everybody's really passionate about the mission statement. And a little plug, we are actively hiring. So if you are interested, please reach out to me. Quickly, I wanted to run over some thoughts on being self-taught and some thoughts on job seeking in the pandemic. So being a self-taught engineer is, it's kind of unique to be in a specialization where you can teach yourself and you don't need to go to a 4-year or 8-year college to be competitive in the field. So you can really turn your passion into your profession. Engineering for me did start out as a passion, a hobby, a side project, and I ended up turning it into a profession, and I know that you guys can do it as well. Some benefits are no student loan, which is nice. You can go at your own pace. And you know, back when I started, there wasn't really, I think YouTube was around, but in its infancy. But now there's just tons of open source projects, online courses, certifications, etc. It's never been a better time. Some of the cons are you do need to work a little bit harder to make sure that you're well-rounded. And it might be harder to get an internship if that's really your way to get a foot in the door. I'd recommend for engineering going the QE route to get your foot in the door, but I'm sure that's just because that's what I did. Let's see, job seeking in the pandemic. So as I mentioned, I was recently on the job market as a job seeker. And I was really scared entering the job market because of the state of the world. It's easy to be scared. But what I found is that even though there's lots of companies that have really been hit by the pandemic, there are just as many companies that have had great opportunities and growth in this pandemic. So there's lots of companies that are hiring. Most companies that are hiring are open to remote, obviously. But because of that, I feel like a lot of companies are also kind of committing to doing remote after the pandemic as well, as like a competitive advantage, right? So if you ever did want to get into remote work, I think now would be a really great time to do that. Some advice that I would give if you are looking to transition, grow your network. That's super, super important. It's kind of difficult to do now that we're all digital, but still don't be shy. Reach out to your friends on LinkedIn. Start growing that. You never know when you'll want to talk to them about something, or when your paths will cross again. As James and I, our paths have crossed multiple times. You want to partner with reputable agencies as well. I like ProFocus for many reasons. I consider them a very reputable agency, but there are some agencies that you may want to steer clear of. I'm certainly not going to name and shame, but just be careful with who you partner with. Study and use time management techniques is something that really helped me. I'm a big fan of the Get Things Done methodology, as well as Pomodoro. And I can't tell you how much that's helped me stay on task with my studies. And keying off of studying, you want to make sure that you're constantly sharpening your tools, especially if you're self-taught. One of the things about being an engineer is the interview process is usually a little bit rough. It's a little bit of a gauntlet because you need to be able to prove that you can walk the walk instead of just talk the talk. So if your skills are sharp and you put in the time studying, you're going to be in a good place there. So to conclude, I think I covered just about anything, but I wanted to thank again ProFocus and AgilePDX for putting this on.
Thanks, Tyler. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right. And then the next panelist that we have is John Boone.
Thanks, James. Hi, everybody. My name's John Boone. I'm the founder and president of ProFocus Technology. And I've been working with hiring managers since 1993 as a staffing professional. So I basically help managers find the right people, and I help people find jobs. So I've been doing this my whole career, essentially. And so, I work every day in the tech talent ecosystem. So I'm constantly talking to tech managers about what they're looking for in their hires and what they want and the best candidates and why they hired this person and why they didn't hire that person. I'm also talking with the candidates as well as to, why they got hired or what, which ones do and which ones don't. And so just it's a flood of information about what tech, how to move ahead in your tech career. I also am a podcast host, and I do podcasts with tech leaders and CIOs, and also get some really good feedback there because those CIO podcasts talk a lot about how to get ahead in your career and so forth. And so I'm going to distill some of those takeaways as well for you. But basically, I'm going to share with you some ideas and things that I've learned that could help you advance your career. And these are basically, feedback from CIOs. So if you ask a CIO, what should I do to get ahead in my career? Then these are some of the main things that they would say. And one of the most interesting ones I thought is just to kind of talk to other people in your organization about tech. And so, for example, if let's say you're a software engineer and you go to the break room and you run into the CFO, and just start talking to them. Say, talk to them about the technology. Talk to them about what problems they're having with technology, and what they wish their systems did better, and what do they think the customers want. And what this does is, first of all, you're learning a lot and talking with that person. You're building a relationship with that person as well. And what's going to happen is that they're going to be wondering, let's talk about who we're going to promote. Who's our next manager, or who's going to be the next VP. That CFO is going to know about this conversation he or she had with you. And it's going to remember, and then you'll have had this conversation as well with other people. It's just a great way to kind of network your way through the company and become like a thought leader and someone who really, is interested in making things better for the company and so forth. So that's a really interesting tip there. Another one, which is real basic, but it's really important, is learn your business. So whatever company you're working at, learn about your industry, research it. There's probably all kinds of stuff online about your industry. Talk to the business managers, learn what the business priorities are there. And then once you kind of built up that groundwork, then you can start making suggestions at work based on your knowledge. You'll say, there's this other part of our industry that we're not even tapping. We should use our software to do this. And then all of a sudden you're really standing out. So important. Of course, your business knowledge and skills is really, really big. We all are into tech, and we love tech, and we love all of our tech stuff and our software engineering and all these kinds of things. But, it's the business knowledge and the business skills that are going to get you ahead if you want to go into management and leadership and be these kinds of things. So just learn about budgeting, learn about investing, learn about the business outcomes, and just learn all about business that you can and be really helpful for you. And then, of course, work beyond expectations. Work outside your job description, and just do everything you can to stand out. Next slide, James. There's a couple of just tips you can do as you go along to make sure you got your network strong and so forth. These are really the key ones. One is to link in to everyone you ever meet in your job. So every employee that you get to know at the company, every manager, every vendor, you just link in with those people as you go, and you'll build up a network over time. And, as an older person, I wish I had that, from my earlier days. and it would be really amazing if I had my complete network still connected from when I started working, in which of course is not possible, and I've lost a lot of my network for that reason. Join an association that's for your industry or for a certain technology. Cultivate relationships with people in your field, get to know them, try to help them and things like that. It's worth the time to do this. Keep your LinkedIn up to date all the time. Work on open source projects. Build up, work credibility on GitHub and Bitbucket and Stack Overflow. Managers love to see that stuff. That's really, really important. And you can get involved in those open source projects too if you're not a software engineer. So they need project managers, they need UX people, they need Scrum masters, they need really everybody on those open source projects to pull the project together. The one big one too is to help others. Every time you get a chance to help someone else, and then you'll be able to, those people will help you later, and it'll come back. So this target company strategy can either be a job hunting strategy or it can be a career strategy for you. But either way, you're essentially building up a list of target companies that you would really like to work at. And so these companies might be in a city you really want to move to, or there's a product that you love, or you love the leader, you just really want to work for Elon Musk, for example, or something. So you want to build up a list of these companies, and you'll have these slides, and there's some details in here, but just, follow your passions and make the list of companies. Go on, James. And then just reach out to people at those companies, whether you're looking for a job or whether you have a job and you're just interested in that company. But reach out to people and ask their advice. Ask them for their input in your career and what direction you should have and things like that. And be sure that you're not calling them about getting a job. You just want to get their advice and so forth. And you really have to be truthful about that and so forth. And here's a little text block here. This is like if you were to reach out to a manager, like, well, what do I say? I don't even know the person. Well, here's an example, and you can customize this for yourself. But it says, hi, my name is John Boone. I'm a software engineer with ML experience. I'm working to move my career into self-driving vehicles. And I have some questions, and I was wondering if you would be willing to share your experience and give me some advice. And so, boom, there you go. That's that message would probably land you a conversation with the self-driving engineering leader that you want to talk to, then you'd learn from that conversation, and it'll take your career in good directions. So we have some resources. There's a couple of job hunting seminars that go more in depth in this 100 companies project, as well as other job hunting strategies. And then we also have a link for you about achievement-based resumes, which is really important. It's a mistake that a lot of people make on their resumes, is to not be achievement-based. So we'll share those links after the event. Be happy to have you connect with me on LinkedIn. I'd be happy to be part of your network. So feel free to reach out.
Thanks, John. Appreciate it. Mm-hmm. A lot of great stuff in there. And good plug for all the other resources too that we have. Really good stuff in those, and much more in depth as well into some of that content. Feel free to check out. We'll get you the link. And up next is Kristen Andrews. Thanks for joining us, Kristen.
Thank you. Started. My name is Kristen Andrews. I'm a senior software engineering manager, one of two at Zoom+Care in Portland. I just want to start off by just giving you just a little bit of a rundown of myself. I'm a mom. I'm a daughter. I am a big gamer. I'm a streamer on Twitch. My hobbies are racing cars and hanging out with my dogs. I'm engaged. I'm big on technology, like really big. I mean, I used to camp out overnight for iPhones. I was a blogger, and I'm also an Instagram influencer, so I stay pretty busy. Go to the next slide. So I want to just tell you a little bit about how I ended up being a senior software engineering manager. I started out my tech career a little bit non-standard, like everybody else here. I had a blog in Chicago that was pretty big. It was a mommy blog. I was really into photography. I thought I was going to be a photographer at that time, but it's a very expensive hobby. And I started freelancing and teaching myself how to write code and redesign my blog. And then people started asking me for help with their websites. And the next thing I knew, I was being contacted by clients like Spin Magazine and Vibe Magazine to redesign their websites. At the same time, my ex, who I was with at the time, would take a lot of my web design and web development customers and turn them into hosting clients. And we started a hosting company together. At a certain point, we ended up kind of, not really working well together, which I think is pretty common. We're mixing like personal stuff with work stuff. So he continued to grow that business from a hosting company to a data center. And then I continued on my career. My first real job, not freelancing, I was hired as a CSS ninja by a marketing agency in Chicago called Acuity Group. I worked for them on a lot of different projects. We worked on Kohl's.com, Sears.com, a lot of retail websites. And at some point they sent me out to client site, and Sears decided to keep me and gave me a job there as one of their first UX hires onto their new business group. Their new business group was responsible for incubating ideas that the CEO had. This is in the time when .com was really coming up. People were really starting to understand the value in social influence and how people could utilize that to help people make decisions. And so I worked on a lot of different projects that they had that was around that type of market. And when they would get off the ground, then we would hand them off to other teams to support if they were successful. And if they were not, we would just toss it and start another one. So it's kind of like working on startups all the time. And it was really fun. A lot of different types of technology, a lot of experience all over the place, which I think really segued into a lot of things that I had in my career later on. While I worked there, they also had me doing a lot of interviewing and staffing of developers, reviewing resumes, helping them come up with best practices, a lot of things that at the time, I guess I didn't really realize were management roles, responsibilities. And it kind of set me up for what I'd be doing for the rest of my career. I just didn't realize at the time that that's what it was going to be. After Sears, I ended up going back to work at the data center for a little bit. My ex called me up one day and he said that he had hired a bunch of developers and they weren't getting any development done and he needed some help. When I went in to see what was going on, I came in the morning and I realized he was walking into the office where the developers sat, giving them over-the-shoulder requirements, walking out. Then they would spend the whole day running reports for the business out of the database and not writing any code. And then he would come back at the end of the day a little bit upset about the fact that they didn't read his mind and get the work done that he wanted them to do. So that was kind of an interesting conversation to have with him around Agile and how to set teams up for success. And he ended up asking me, even though we were divorced, to come in and help him run that team. So I ended up taking on that team, also their whole NOC team that supported the data center, and a team of DevOps engineers to help them deploy a cloud product and an end-to-end hardware lifecycle product, which would do everything from deploying OSs out to servers to tracking hardware and what machines it was in so that they could understand if it was going bad, what machines also came from the same purchase orders. After those projects wrapped up, I ended up meeting someone here in Portland, and one thing led to another, and ended up moving here and taking a risk, and ended up working at CMD Agency, which is where all of the variety of technology that I had been exposed to really came together. A lot of it was web focus, and then some of it was infrastructure focus, and pretty much anything that their marketing clients would come to them with the technology problem to solve. My role there was to help them understand how to charge for it and then babysit the project as it went through design and technology to make sure that it could be executed for what the marketing agency was charging for, and that there was no tech risk and that it would be stable when it went live. So I did that for about 6-7 months, and then they hired a new CTO, which is where I met John McCannis, who's actually the CIO that I work for today at Zoom+Care. He came in and he decided that he needed someone to manage all the developers there, and I quickly sent him a letter of intent to let him know that that was something that I was interested in, and I ended up getting promoted into that role. 2 years later, he left the company and he promoted me to running all technology for the whole marketing agency. If you're not familiar with them, they're, I think, the second biggest agency in Portland. Their clients are Intel, Microsoft. They do a lot of stuff for Xbox. Pretty much all the big tech brands that you know on the West Coast, and most of the healthcare brands on the West Coast. They do a lot of stuff for Providence and Portland. From there, John left and he went to Providence Healthcare. And I ran the technology side of that agency for a couple of years. And then I started to get a little bit bored. And John started messaging me about a lot of the problems that he was solving at Providence. And I decided that it was time for me to move on. So I went to Providence. Worked there for about 2 years, similar role, running a lot of engineering teams, partnering with other engineering managers, and helping to deploy web apps out to production, and a lot of web service development. At the end of the 2 years that I was there, I deployed a really big project into production around companies that need to bill health plans for patient services. And John had moved to Zoom+Care and ended up, again, coaching me away with exciting problems to solve. And that's when I ended up at Zoom+Care. So I've been at Zoom for about a year now. We've grown our teams there from 8 engineers to we now have 5 agile teams of engineers that covers quality and software. I think our whole group now is around 50 people. And then we're also augmenting with teams in Mexico. And I really enjoy it. A lot of big problems to solve. Zoom is growing big time. And I really like the size of the company, a little bit less bureaucratic than bigger companies like Providence. I want to leave you guys with a few takeaways, things that I think that have really propelled me in my career in lieu of having any sort of formal tech education. First thing I would say is always choose your boss, not your job. Having a boss that's really invested in your future is always going to be something that will help you along the way. Finding good partnerships there and being able to have transparency with your boss is really, really going to help you navigate and explore different directions you want to go and be supported through it. Drink a lot of coffee. I think everyone will say this. Networking is very important. Very, very important. I think that's one of the biggest things that I took away from working at the marketing agency is that meeting people and connecting with people and building those relationships is always going to support you through everything that you do later on. Recognize discomfort in yourself. Anytime I run into something where I feel uncomfortable or a little bit afraid or nervous about doing it, I recognize that as something that I need to push myself to do and do it over and over again until I get good at it. Assume best intent in those around you. Which is always really challenging. But I always tell people that technology is easy, people are hard. And if you can work with people easily, the technology is even easier. So always assume best intent in those around you and encourage others to do that also. If you can always make what you're doing about the work and less about ego and encourage others to, it just makes it a little bit easier to solve problems together. Be authentic and compassionate. It's no secret that these days people recognize that emotional intelligence is really key when it comes to building teams and demonstrating signs of leadership. And that's something that's always going to be something in your pocket. So listen to those around you, value what they say, treat them how you want to be treated, and always bring that to the table in how you interact with others. And then also know your weaknesses. None of us are good at everything. So surround yourself with people who are really good at things that you're really bad at, and make them your partners. I think that that's the biggest thing that we have on my leadership team that I work with now is that we all just really complement each other very well, and we trust each other to be good at the things that we're not good at. So, thank you so much.
Thanks, Kristen. I love that, to choose your boss. I love that. Just, people say that people quit people, but which is so very true. But I love the idea of flipping it and thinking about it from the perspective of choosing your boss and as opposed to your job. That's a great point. Just a reminder before we get to our last panelist presentation, we will have Q&A afterwards, and continue to get your questions in. Submit your questions for the group of panelists. And then without further ado, Mike, Bebo.
Hey, everybody. Mike Bebo. I think I recognize a few names on the on the guest list there. Everybody logged in, so shout out to, I think, Gina, Chen, a few other folks that I think I recognize there. But I thought I'd kind of stick with the theme of people's sort of journey today, and I think you can probably go to the next slide. I'm a software development manager at AWS Elemental here in Portland. And there's a long journey that got me there, and I can talk a little bit about that in the Q&A. I started out back in the 80s with an Apple computer, went to the Air Force Academy, graduated in 91, went and got my pilot wings, and then went off to grad school, did some of that, flew jets for a while, went to grad school again, and then stayed pretty much the rest of my career flying F-15s. Got out of the Air Force in 2011, worked for a couple of military contractors, the last one being Northrop Grumman, which is, kind of really where I really started doing kind of the software development as a systems integration engineer for the new Air Operations Center. That was a pretty neat job. But then I moved from the East Coast here to Portland about, I guess now 6 years ago. I worked for a high-end web company for a little while, and then most recently before AWS, Jaguar Land Rover, and led a team. I had two teams actually. One that ran a lot of the DevOps maturity for the software development internal to Jaguar Land Rover, and then another team that used that. And then we worked on a lot of the embedded systems, most recently for the new Range Rover Defender that just got released this past year. So there's a little black box somewhere in the car there that my team and I worked on. And then that got me to kind of where I'm at. So you can get the next slide. And I thought I'd, kind of in the spirit of AgilePDX hosting and everything, I'd pick up three things that I kind of took with me from a previous career that I've been able to kind of work into my job as both a manager and then previously as an integration engineer. So, and really the three things are understanding and applying the levels of warfare. And warfare, obviously we don't do warfare, but again, I'm reaching back into a previous life. Second one being brief to perfection and debrief to perfection. I think the slide says something different there, and then burn down risk and ambiguity and uncertainty. But if you can go on to the next slide real quick. So the first thing is understanding, and this is a big lesson that I brought with me that kind of fits nicely into, the Agile way of thinking, or the DevOps methodology and that whole kind of framework, whether you are at a company that's doing SAFe or you're doing, I don't know, all the other ones, Dave, there's all these sort of frameworks out there that are all really great, depending on how you need to fit that into your company. But what I break it down to is the same thing that's been going on for thousands of years in sort of military operations, is those three levels of strategic, operational, and tactical. And that's something that I really bring with me to different companies, because, you can't win a war if you just have an unconnected string of tactical victories, right? The cost is too high. And obviously, people wouldn't last very long or tolerate that for very long. And you really want to, start with an end state, work your way backwards. And the way that you do that, at least the way that I learned it in my previous life, was, through those three levels. A lot of people will say the operational level, or operations. When you hear that word, people usually are referring to, keeping the lights on. When I talk about the operational level, it's that sort of art. In my second postgrad at the Air University, we called it operational art. Believe it or not, I actually have a degree that says that on it. And what that is it's that sort of unquantifiable way of hooking strategy down to tactics, right? And that's probably the biggest thing that I've brought with me. It's a real good fit into Agile process and the Agile way of thinking, because it's about the principles. If you can go to the next slide. When you translate this over to kind of what we do, or what you might be trying to switch your career into doing, you can't make a product without an unconnected string of features, or you're just going to burn through all your resources, and you'll soon find yourself out of business, right? And a lot of these are things that you hear in meetups, TED Talks, whatever. Start with the customer experience, work backwards. That's probably a Steve Jobs quote that I misattributed there, for all I know. But the same thing, you have to go through those same levels. You got to have a strategic level, an operational level, and a tactical level. The operational level is something where project managers live, and that's where you often hear about agile process, right? Sprint cycles, release cycles, and getting on a cadence, but if you don't have strategy and good skill and good buy-in from engineers and designers, then it really doesn't do you much good. So, all right, next slide. The next thing that I brought with me from my previous life was brief to perfection and debrief to perfection. And what I mean by that is, have a perfect plan, or at least what you think is a perfect plan, because as soon as you start to execute on your perfect plan, what you actually need to do is going to change, right? And then have a way to accurately observe what it is you're actually doing, right? Through, instrumenting. I mean, we have zillions and zillions of dashboards at AWS. And we, believe it or not, we exhaustively go through the dashboards for all 300 and plus services around AWS with the CEO of AWS once a week. And somebody amongst all those services gets picked to brief their dashboards, right? That's the observations. But if you don't know what's going on with what you're doing, then you can't really make the match. And that space in between those two, that's where the learning happens. That's where the growth happens. And if you don't do it right and you fight it, that's where conflict and failed projects and poor quality come from. So it's kind of a creed. In fact, I have a book somewhere in my office here written by an old fighter pilot buddy of mine who's on the speaking tour now. And I think it's just called Debrief to Win. And a guy I used to fly with back in the day. And it's a great book, and it kind of covers this. And I think actually expectations, observations, those two words are probably stole from Tony Robbins or something. But that's the idea is you got to move those two things as close together as possible and figure out which side of the equation is out of balance before you waste your resources on it. So big lesson I brought with me. And then the final one is this idea of burning down risk and ambiguity early, right? Again, in warfare, obviously, you don't want to send people into unknown situations when you don't have to. John Boyd is the one that made this crazy diagram right here, and it's called the OODA loop. In fact, at the Air University, there is a little loop out in front of the building called OODA loop. And the idea here is, again, if you're an Agile practitioner, this is going to look very familiar, right? We have these principles of war that were written, I don't know when Sun Tzu wrote them, a long time ago, right? And those start to draw some guardrails and some ways of working that we turn those into doctrine, we turn those into tenets, we turn those into tactics. We actually use tenets at Amazon as well. So there's a lot of translation there. But if you don't have a nice framework to help you start focusing your efforts, it's easy to get lost. So next slide. So when I talk about, burning down that risk and ambiguity, when you're talking about military, the way we did it is we would take that strategy. We had skilled tacticians, we had skilled pilots and whatnot, and we would build these lists of, okay, if we're gonna make this be over quick, what do we need to deny the other person of? What are those targets? What are we gonna do? And then we would turn those into a daily cycle, a cadence. You've heard the term, develop on cadence, release on demand, and it was that kind of same mindset, right? Those daily orders would turn into a list of actual things that we want to, hit. Hey, I want to hit that fuel tank or whatever to keep them from sending bad guys our way. If you hit the next slide, that same exact sort of mindset is the last thing that I really brought with me, because it kind of translates into just this overall thing of making software, right? I make a list of features. If I have a strong strategy and I have strong vision from, whether it be product management, leadership, or whatnot, if I know what I intend to build, because remember, that's going to change every day, then I can start turning that into something that tacticians or developers and designers and people who actually make things can start to act upon, right? And so stories and teams start to break that up, because now time becomes the big factor, right? You can't just snap your fingers and have everything done at once. And then just rinse, repeat. All right, and then back to the expectations, observations. If I'm watching that as I go and I'm tracking exactly the status of where I am now, not where I thought I was a month ago, and constantly adjust, then eventually I'll end up with something really cool that customers will love and pay my company a bunch of money for. So again, I wanted to just throw these out there just to make the point that, you have something in your past, you have a job, you have a way of thinking, you have something that you can take with you into that next career. And John talked a lot about that, about your experiences and how you frame things. So that's kind of my message is, use that, bring it with you, translate it over, and you will be surprised at how much we all are actually thinking alike, just saying it in different ways. That's what I got.
That's great stuff. Thanks, Mike. All right. Now we're on to our Q&A portion of our webinar. And be sure to get your questions in. We're going to start off with a few that we have for our group Q&A before we go into individual sessions. And a reminder for anyone who joined us late, just a heads up that we're now finished with our presentations. We're moving on to our group Q&A, where we'll have Q&A for all of the participants, all the panelists. So go ahead and submit that in through the Q&A function as opposed to the chat. So make sure you're using that questions and answer function within Zoom. And after we're done with that group Q&A, we'll jump into individual sessions. We'll have a link for you. You'll be able to jump into individual sessions with either John, Kristen, Mike, or Tyler, and ask them questions directly on video. So right now we're in our webinar portion. We'll just jump right into Q&A. And the first one, we have a few questions that we've prepared as we get questions to come in. We'll ask the group before we go into the individuals. But we talked about hiring, and I know, Tyler, you mentioned that you guys are hiring and others as well. Hiring is recovering. It's one thing that we're seeing. We're really seeing it here at ProFocus. We're seeing, as well as in our recent Portland Tech Trends survey that's not quite closed yet, but just as of the data that we have from hundreds of Portland tech leaders, 42% of those respondents said that their headcount, their internal headcount, will increase in 2021. So we know that that's going to be a trend. We're seeing it right now, and we know that it's going to continue. So a couple of questions around that in terms of hiring and the interview process. First one for our panel is, what is one piece of resume advice, thinking of resume advice that would be appropriate for the tech community that you think that they should know?
You mean aside from do exactly what your recruiting agency tells you?
Yes.
I'll take this one first. I haven't done a ton of hiring, during the pandemic thing, because we've got a pretty solid group on my team where I'm at. But at Jaguar Land Rover, there were times where I had probably 50, 60 resumes stacked up on my desk. We didn't really have we went through a period of time with no sort of support, and my advice would be get to the point. I didn't have a lot of time, and I never made it past the first half page. I would make and as wrong as I know that probably was sometimes, I didn't have a choice, and if I wasn't interested after a half page, you went in the maybe later pile. So.
And how often do you get to the maybe later pile?
Next time an opening comes around. It's a tough one, and that's why I think that agencies like you guys are pretty critical, because you can help filter through a lot of that and help people get to the right ones to look at a lot quicker, because you don't know how many of those that you're passing over that would have been a perfect fit.
Yeah, absolutely.
I would echo that. I would say as a candidate, maybe looking at the job description and retailoring your resume for some of the skill sets right up front and center that that they're looking for. Because same thing, if you're going through 50, you're really just quickly screening over what pops out of the page at you and then coming up with a short list to screen on the phone. So.
Yeah, it's a tough balance. As a hiring manager, you don't really have a ton of time to read through an essay. And I know when you're creating your resume, it's easy to fall into a habit of wanting to be verbose, right? Wanting to elaborate on all of the experience that you've had, which is super valuable. But I'd say find a happy medium between bullet points and being short and to the point. I would say more than a half page, but depending on what job you're trying to fill and how many applicants you have, definitely keep all the important stuff on the first page, preferably towards the top.
Yeah, James, I'd add one thing. My experience at Amazon is different, because obviously we have a pretty deep support system for the hiring process at the company I'm at now. And your resume gets you the interview, not the job. And so that's something to remember is focusing on that. You're not trying to get the job with your resume. You're trying to get the interview. We have a very, very hard interview process where I'm at now. And that's, your resume almost doesn't matter at that point.
Yeah. John, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I think that to have an achievement kind of flavor to your resume is really important, and so many people make this mistake. So I'll give you an example, actually, imagine an ice cream scooper. So the person's an ice cream scooper, and then their resume reads like this. So this is the wrong way to do it. So it would say there's 3 bullets: scooped ice cream, operated the cash register, and clean the store. And so, that's what they did in their job. That was their job description, essentially, and that's a good description of what they did. But it would be so much better if they said, if the 3 bullets read like this: was awarded the fastest ice cream scooper, for the month of April. I always balanced my cash register within 50 cents. And third, I was nicknamed Clean Sally for how good a job I did in cleaning the store. So it's an achievement-based resume. It talks about the things that you did in an achievement way, and not just what you did as in like kind of the job description. So that's a mistake I see all the time on resumes.
Absolutely. Any other thoughts before we jump into the next? We're good? I would say one other interview challenge here obviously is now, we're doing webinars remotely, and now so many people are interviewing and being onboarded remotely as well. Some of it's partially remote and socially distant coffees, but a lot of companies are hiring 100% remote right now. So for those of you, obviously, managers that have been interviewing and onboarding people remotely and have done a lot of remote interviews, what are some tips that you can give to the audience in terms of navigating those remote interviews?
I'll jump on this one. So try to keep it as normal as possible, right? Pretend that you are driving to an office and having a nice formal interview. Make sure your hair is done, I suppose. Make sure you have a really good audio video connection. If you're sitting out in the backyard with a spotty internet signal and your dogs are barking, it's going to be hard to get the amount of information that I really need in order to make a decision about whether to progress you to the next stage in the interview or not. That's one tip that I think you should really take to heart. Yeah, that's one. I'll let the other panelists add to that.
Go ahead, Kristen.
Check your technology early, because you only get a certain amount of time for them to get to know you, and you get to know them and understand if it's a good fit both ways. If you're spending 10 minutes of that trying to connect or trying to get your mic or your camera to work, just eats away at the time that you have. So
I'd say from a personal lesson, when I was looking to change jobs before I got the job with Amazon, I did interview with one other company, and it was all remote interviews because the company itself has always been remote. And I got some feedback after that process, and it was, man, we really like you, but one of the guys, because we have to have a unanimous, didn't really think you were delivery focused or focused on results enough. And I was like, wow, boy, I thought I had stories and everything specifically for that. And I think as I thought more about it, I was probably, maybe because it was remote, not formal enough. This is the first remote interview I had ever done, and it felt a little bit like I was just, talking with my brother over the internet, as opposed to that sort of like beating heart and nervousness you get when you're in person and you're on the spot and you're at their sort of home court advantage. So I don't know if that's true or not, but something to consider.
I think that's a perfect point. Yeah, I see that a lot. You see that nowadays, it seems like it's more prevalent than it used to be, where people are much more casual in interviews. And I think that your mindset going into it definitely is different, right? Versus walking into the office, into the lobby, you're getting introduced to people. It's a much more professional environment. You maybe just came from, cleaning up a toddler's mess to now jumping into an interview and they're kind of in the background. It's so natural to be more casual. I think that's a great point that you bring up.
I'm going to add to Tyler. Tyler mentioned, internet connection and so forth. I just want to, you want to make sure you have a good setup. You want to have the angle of your camera proper. You want to have the lighting of your, good. You're going to want to be close enough to the camera, kind of like I am, and don't be like a tiny head. The managers, they need to get to know you a little bit. And if you're like this dark room or a fuzzy camera, or, you can, your head's like this small in the back of the, back of the picture, they're just not going to be able to get to know you. They're not going to hire you. So it's really important.
Yeah, I would say like camera tech right now it's pretty hard to come by with COVID because everybody wants it. But if you had to prioritize your investment, I would prioritize audio. Seeing a grainy camera is a little bit easier than having a disconnected audio experience where the conversation just doesn't flow very well, or it's delayed, or it's a little disconnected. So I would prioritize that if you choose.
Yeah, I think you're definitely right. I run video on demand team, and we will sacrifice everything in the name of, the audio, because that's one of the most annoying things for customers when the audio skips.
Yeah, I would agree. As a streamer, that's kind of just like a known industry thing where you want your audio to be right, because listening to bad audio can be very irritating and annoying. Less than perfect quality video is acceptable.
Yeah. Before we go to the next question, one thing I would add is we all have the luxury now, or anyone that's interviewing, you have the luxury of having some documents around you. And so that just makes you feel more confident in going into things. We always recommend people have their resume on a phone screen, but have your resume in paper in front of you as well. You can always kind of look down at, should a question come up, and just to make you feel more comfortable if they ask a question in your background, that you have that readily available. So you can have material all around you, and most of it you may not even refer to, but just something that your eyes can wander to should you feel like you run into one of those moments where you get stumped. That's one thing I would add, is just being able to refer to those resources.
Kind of sets the expectation too, because if I'm interviewing somebody and they don't know something simple, you'd be like, well, you could probably have it open in front of you.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah, showing you're prepared. So I know we have some questions we're going to get to the group here. We just have a couple more pre-planned questions. One, really it's about looking at remote work and the future of work, and the world is changing. I mean, that's one thing that obviously everybody knows now. And our recent Portland Tech Trends survey showed that 53% of Portland tech leaders believe that their company will be mostly remote after the pandemic. And 86% actually agree that their organization has adjusted well and is continuing to adjust well to the remote work environments. And so looking at remote work, looking at the future of what Portland tech is going to look like, or the tech industry overall, first question is what's one piece of advice that you would give both to managers as well as individual contributors in tech who are working remotely?
I can start it again, but for me, it's remember that the hallway conversations and the by the ways don't exist anymore. And so, nobody likes updating Jira tickets, but if you don't have a clear understanding of what's the next thing that I'm supposed to make, and does everybody know the status of that without them having to come ask me, that helps quite a bit. Slack's great, but if I were to open my Slack window right now and show you the number of channels I'm subscribed to, just in my Elemental one, not even including the rest of AWS, you would probably fall out of your chair.
I'll piggyback on that one. So this is one that I don't necessarily subscribe to yet, but I'm going to. Here, let me take off my filter and you can see what I'm talking about. If I can. There we go. This is my lovely office. Make sure you have a decent office that's isolated from noise if you can. I've got my water heater in here, so it's not super quiet, but my kids, I've got 3 of them, are inside, and that's the biggest noise in my house. So make sure you have a nice place where you can go to focus, to concentrate, to work. Get ready before the day starts, just like you normally would. You know, if you start your stand up in the morning after just crawling in bed, you're going to not be as sharp, but you're going to come across that way as well, even if you don't necessarily think so. And like you said, Michael, as well, you know, the water cooler conversation, the hallway conversation doesn't happen. So really lean into your communication tools. Make sure that you're touching base with your coworkers. Have emotional check-ins as well. I find that's been important because it's hard to read somebody's body language necessarily over Zoom. And you might not have an opportunity to necessarily ask them about how their dogs, you know, did at the vet last week or whatever, if it's just a scheduled meeting. So use your communication tools, reach out and say hi, and have a dedicated space. I'd say are really important tips.
Turn on your camera.
Yes.
I agree with that. I think, you know, it's weird, and I don't think that companies require it because it is a little bit invasive to make a rule like that. But I will say from personal experience that there are some people that I work with that always leave it off, some that leave it on, and some that turn it on and off depending on if they're, you know, eating and working at the same time. But the people who keep it off all the time are becoming more and more distant from engaging with others. You don't get to see their body language. You don't really get the soft language, that compassionate connection with them. And it does affect how you're able to work with your peers.
I have a rule that if you're going to talk for more than like a yes, no, you need to turn on your camera at least while you're talking.
It's a good rule.
I would. So my advice to the managers would be to both measure results. You know, to have some kind of system in your company so that you can measure results well, and then also be sure to trust your people. You know, there's you know, it's basically proven that people are working hard and working remotely, and it's working for everyone. So let's just trust everybody. And then have a better system. You know, their old system, the manager's old system might have been, oh, I want to make sure I can see everybody working. And, you know, that's the old school, you know, 1950s or something. And now we can trust our people to make results. And then for individual employees, I would recommend just keeping your boss updated. You know, this is an old piece of advice, actually, is to like some old techniques that people have used, is going back 20 years or 10 years or something, but to give your boss a weekly memo or an update of what you've done, you know, what you did that week and what you've accomplished and that I think is really good advice nowadays when you don't see your manager very much. Send them an email, say, hey, this is what I got done this week.
I agree, John. That goes to what I mentioned about expectations and observations. If I set clear expectations for you, and then I have to go put in a whole bunch of work to observe where you are because you're not giving me updates or you're just not being transparent, that gets a little bit cumbersome when you start to scale that for a manager times 20 people.
Yeah. I think where you have the luxury of, or the convenience, I suppose, for many of us, it's a convenience and we enjoy working from home for many of us. Obviously, there is a little bit more of a burden on communication or an obligation to that as well. So beyond remote work, knowing that, you know, there are just so many things changing beyond, obviously, we know that trend that remote work is going to continue. What is really some of the one or some of the most exciting trends that you're seeing regarding the future of work here in the tech industry and specific to Portland as well?
Video on demand is way up. It's more selfish.
Yeah,
I'll jump in. I've got one thing. I'm not sure how specific to Portland this is, but so it's really great that everybody's been able to find out how to work remotely in an optimal way, right? We're more effective. We are learning to manage our time really well, et cetera, et cetera. But what I think is super exciting about the industry right now with regards to remote work is all of the supplemental accessories to working remotely have gone remote as well. For example, this meeting is done remotely. Meetups are done remotely, right? So you can cram more into your schedule if you so wish, and you don't have to worry about traffic. And yeah, it's just really nice seeing everything kind of make the trend towards remote.
Best cartoon I've seen during this was it's a guy sitting at his desk, thinking to himself, "Wow, these meetings really could have all been done over email." And I think people are really having those revelations now. The old school folks who were resistant to this new way of working have kind of been pushed over the cliff. So I think it's going to stick.
What other trends are you seeing in terms of the future of work in tech?
I continue to keep an eye on artificial intelligence. A lot of stuff that's really taking away a lot of the repetitive tasks that people are doing in their day-to-day roles and freeing critical thinkers up to work on higher value work. I think it's, as we're starting to rely on technology more and more, it's becoming more and more important. So.
I think you're going to see a lot more companies reach those higher levels of maturity with their sort of, DevOps methodologies and whatnot of, automation. I mean, now, Google and Azure are pretty firmly in the game against AWS, and there's lots of engineers out there that actually know how to really build all of this, infrastructure as code and all this, and that skill set is to the point now that if you don't understand how that works, even if you're not the one doing it, even if you're just a developer and you don't understand the magic behind how your code gets from your keyboard to the customer, you're probably going to be behind.
I think an exciting trend is like the rise of the IT department to become the digital transformation department for the company. And that, we used to be, making sure everybody's PCs worked and providing reporting and applications. And now IT department is going to be pushing towards the front and actually building the business and creating new revenue and things like that. And that, the IT department is going to have the best ideas and for actual business ideas for making things better. And it's going to lead to an interesting trend, which is related, which is CIOs moving into the president role of a company, and the CEO role, which has not been very common. But as just imagine that more and more companies with CIOs essentially as presidents, and how that's going to be, a transformation and an exciting one for our industry.
I definitely would echo that. They do say that that's a sign of a very, very mature IT organization, is whether or not it's treated like a venue or a vendor by the business, or if the business is aligning to IT.
Yeah.
Look for that when you're job seeking.
And the companies who are crushing that are really way out in front. Delta Airlines, KeyBank. I think the DevOps Enterprise Summit starting this week. I think it's online now, but over and over the keynote speakers for that. Disney now, absolutely crushing it in that area. They can send updates to the Millennium Falcon ride while it's in operation. So it's pretty amazing.
Yeah, it is one of the things that attracted me to my role that I have now, where it was described to me in my interview that the parent company viewed Zoom+Care as a tech company that happens to do healthcare and not a healthcare company. So.
Any other trends? They could also be, could get some more coming in here through the individual questions, Q&A, before we move on to there. But I know
the last one is there's a ton of jobs open in Portland right now, I think.
Is it there are a ton? Oh, yeah.
A lot of open jobs in Portland right now.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, well, let's get to the questions then. Continue to submit them, please, through the question and answer option there. And first question I have here is, how do you start building work portfolios or experiences, for example, managing Agile teams, if you want to pivot into a new field? And so this person's current work does not give them a whole lot of opportunities to practice Agile Scrum, Kanban. How do you, who wants to take that one?
I'll start, but my answer may be incomplete. So Michael, Kristen, John, if you guys have any additional things, please chime in. But I would first of all look for any opportunity to embrace Agile practices within your current team, if possible. If you are a people leader, there might be some aspects that you can incorporate. That's going to give you hands-on experience with real people. If that's not possible in your current situation, I'd go to scrum.org. There's lots of trainings, certifications, etc. You can add that to your resume and start looking out for opportunities to kind of enter that space. I don't know if there's any way to get experience in Agile without joining a company that does that, or kind of incorporating that to your current team, but there may be something that I don't know.
Practice it at home. I have a friend who has a Kanban board for chores for their kids. And my boyfriend and I joke around about it all the time. He's in marketing, but he's picked up a lot of Kanban skills from me, and how he helps people who bring him stuff barter with each other for his priority attention. And I have a friend who, was landscaping their backyard, and they set up like a Scrum project. So just find opportunity.
Cook iteratively without recipes, right?
I would also add to network with people with AgilePDX. So specific for Agile, I mean, this is an AgilePDX partnered event with ProFocus. There are a lot of great people with AgilePDX that will allow you to pick their brain. It may not be practical experience, but the more networking, I assume, obviously, if you're at this event, you've probably gone to some AgilePDX events before, but that would be a little plug to spend time with at AgilePDX events, and that will help you.
Agile's, it's not a process. It's not necessarily a methodology. So it's not the steps and how you get the work done. It's the way that you work with people to get the work done. So there's a lot that you can adopt and establish without adopting the ceremonies as far as team values and how you work together, things that you set up for your teams and peers.
Yeah.
And I've explained it to my mother as, it's basically orienteering, but with people skills.
All right, next questions. If you were to open your resume right now to apply for a job and you can only make one edit, what is the one thing you would edit before you use your current resume to apply?
I'm trying to think what my resume looks like.
I'd have to add ProFocus. That's me. But what else do we have?
So I feel like people put a lot of priority on perfecting the resume. It is important to just have that information up front and center, but it doesn't have to be flawless. It's just a starting point for a conversation. I'd say that the in-person interactions matter a lot more. So I don't know that I would call it like one thing that's like the most important thing, because that kind of gives it so much more attention than it should.
I guess I'd make sure that my most recent accomplishment in my job that I'm proud of is the first bullet on there, and it's very specific about what was accomplished. Kind of going to John's point, that'd probably be the thing is, because, and I don't want to say this in a disparaging way, but I in IT, I almost don't care what you did 3 or 4 years ago. I mean, I do, but I don't. You know what I mean? Like what have you done? It's kind of the what have you done for me lately? That's what I would do to mine, is make sure that that's front and center at the top. They used to tell you put your degrees and your education up top, and nobody cares. I never even get that far when I read a resume.
Yeah.
What I would do is look at the resume and just try to see, what does this resume feel like the job that I'm applying for? And so, for example, a lot of times we'll have, like there can be just things on your resume that just don't fit the job you're applying for. So for example, maybe you're applying for a software engineering job and you have a whole bunch of software quality stuff on your resume, or and so that you create this overall feeling of your resume. And so you want to, that's the first thing I would do, is check that and see, is the feeling of my resume, and the overall view of my resume what I want it to be and what the job I'm applying for. Because that's what the manager is going to say. They're going to look at it and go, oh, is this a software engineer, or not? And then they're going to, if it looks good, they're going to keep looking at it. If it doesn't, they're going to move on to someone else.
All right, and I know we're at time to get to our individual sessions in breakouts. 2 real quick questions. I don't think we have time for all the panelists to respond, but maybe we can get 1 or 2 for each of these final questions. As people interview and look for their next great boss, what should we look for? So what are your favorite qualities in a boss or a mentor that you admire?
I'll chime in on this one. So there's a lot of great qualities a boss can have, but I think the most important ones for me is a boss that always assumes positive intent, right? Communication is tough, especially as an engineer. I know that I'm fairly introverted. I know that most of my team is fairly introverted as well. So sometimes things can get lost in translation. So a boss that always assumes that the meaning behind what you're expressing is positive and constructive is super important. Someone who gives trust without it having to be earned first is another positive quality in a boss, I feel. Not super common. And someone who is who puts life in front of work, right? Work should pay the bills. Work should not be your life. I'm not going to ping you at 9 o'clock at night for you to answer a question that I could research and get the answer to myself, unless I absolutely need to. So those are a few qualities that I think should stand out when you're looking for your next boss, I should say.
I would say someone you can't tell the future, but someone you could see yourself trusting. I mean, my boss knows when I'm interviewing. It's never a secret. It's never a surprise. It's always a step towards my growth. The boss that I have now worked for at 2 companies, and his boss I've worked for at 3 companies. So, kind of visiting that networking piece is important because Portland is small. But with them, it's I would say that like the one thing that I really try and come out of every interview asking myself is this someone that I want to solve problems with every day? If the answer is yes, then I think that would be someone that I would really enjoy working with. So.
Great. And then this last question real quick, we have time just real quick to get this one, and then we'll jump into our individual sessions, is what's the best way to stand out when everything is remote right now? Obviously, you have virtual meetups, but they're curious, just being more active on LinkedIn, adding people within the industry and just trying to network there. That was the question there. Does somebody want to take that?
It's almost like everything that introverts hate, you kind of have to do that now.
I would just say pretend that it's not video conferencing and just reach out and network with people and have coffee with people and things like that. Like you could actually do more of it because people will have 15 minutes or 30 minutes to meet with you on video conference where they didn't have time to go out to lunch with you or something. But just plow ahead and pretend like that the COVID's not in the way, that video conferencing isn't a problem. Yeah.
Relationships take work. You're going to have to work at it a little bit harder, right? There's at least one person I see in the audience that I'm probably going out for coffee with on Friday after work, to someplace that's socially distanced, safe. And it takes effort, and you got to put in the effort to make the connections.
Yeah. And I want to make sure we have time to get to the individual sessions. So thank you to our panelists. This has been awesome. Appreciate your time. And we do have more questions here that people want answered. And so I would just encourage you to please go to the individual sessions. We have a link that I believe Madeline is going to plug into the chat, and go ahead and follow that link. You can also just type it in. It is case sensitive if you do type it. but it's bit.ly/techcareerinsights with a capital T, capital C, capital I. And go ahead and then choose whoever's session you want to go into. You can bounce around a bit, but definitely jump into those. And if you still have a question that is burning, go in there as well and ask the question to any of the panelists. So thank you again to all of our panelists and to AgilePDX for hosting and partnership. And we really appreciate everybody's time. So hopefully we'll see you all in those breakout sessions.
Thanks, guys.
Hey friends, I'm hearing that the link in the chat needs to include https:// in order to be clickable. Can we make that adjustment?
Yes, we can.
Yes.
Madeline, you got that?
Hey, James and Madeline, do we click on the same link on the join Q&A session, or is there a separate?
Yeah, you'll just follow into the same link. And it's just going to be an open discussion for everybody. So you'll just jump in, leave this one and then jump into the other.
Thanks, everybody.
Okay, bye, guys.
Bye.